As a startup founder, there will always be a million new features that you want to add to your app that nobody has asked for. Have you ever think that this will be the killer feature that my startup needs, or this feature will change everything, but the said feature ended up being a flop? Before jumping into your code editor and write a single line of code, you should carefully consider these hidden costs when adding a new feature. Over the past 5 years, I myself constantly have added and deprecated tons of features for my own startup SewaYou, a location-based long-distance exchange app. While it seems like wasting time to add and deprecate features, it's just part of the learning process when iterating your product to deliver the best user experience possible. But you can get ahead and save so much time and resources by knowing the following hidden costs that we're going to cover in this video. Let's start with not really obvious cost that I call the user adoption cost. User adoption cost refers to the time, money, and resources required to promote, educate, and encourage users to adopt a new feature. Even if a new feature is well designed and useful, it might not be immediately adopted by users if they're not aware of it and do not understand how it works. To promote user adoption, you may need to invest in creating user guides or tutorials, and you may also need to conduct user research and usability testing to ensure that the feature is intuitive and easy to use, and that it meets the needs and expectation of your target audience. All of that will obviously take time. Do not overestimate your users' literacy on the usage of your app. While the feature seems obvious for you to use since you came up with the idea, spending time to implement it, and know exactly what is it for, your users are not. For example, on my app SewaYou, there used to be an entire menu called events, and it was dedicated for in-person group meetups, events creation, and participation. Each event must have a location, a date time, and a specific topic that the event organizer would like to go through, such as simulating a business interview to improve their business English or studying for a particular Japanese test. SewaYou encourages members to meet up in person one-on-one, but some people might be intimidated or shy and they would rather meet up in group where there are more people to lower the barrier of real-life interaction. So I thought, why not giving them the possibility to create those group meetup by themselves and let others participate up to like 4 people, something like events making apps. That was the motive behind creating that new and major events feature. The initial release of the feature shows that most users don't dare create those events, and after talking to a few of them, they said they don't want to be put on a spotlight, and also are not sure who will attend the events they create, so at most they will attend others' events but will never create on their own. A few weeks in, I realized that most events were created by users who have their own agenda. That is, there are already events hosts or organizers on other paid apps like Meetup. The events page on SewaYou ended up being cluttered with event organizers who created copy-pasted events just to promote the events for free on SewaYou. While this seems like a monetization opportunity for the app at the later stage, now it just completely dilutes the initial value proposition of SewaYou, which is to connect nearby language learners fellows in person in a one-on-one setting. So after spending a few weeks adding fine-tuning features related to events, I decided to completely sunset and deprecate entirely this menu for now, which leads us to another cost, that is the cost of sunsetting features. If a new feature is not used or useful, it can become a liability for your app. Feature sunsetting cost refers to the cost of removing or deprecating a feature from your app. While adding a new feature can be costly, removing a feature can also incur significant costs both in terms of time and resources. It also includes the potential loss of user trust and loyalty. It's just human nature to often dislike when something is taken away from us. Prime example of this is Google's decision to sunset its social network Google Plus due to low user adoption, but also to multiple security breaches. Google Plus was a moonshot effort to offer a social network experience to users while integrating all the existing products like Google Drive and the like. Imagine all of the integrations already done, and they now have to get that out of each integrated app. That's daunting, and even though I'm sure they use loosely coupled architectures on top of different microservices, it will still take months to completely get rid of Google Plus of the Google ecosystem. It's like trying to tear down a building in a city. There are a number of steps and requirements that need to be followed. These may include obtaining permits and approvals, disconnecting utilities, removing hazardous materials, conducting a structural analysis, and hiring equipment and personnel. The process requires careful planning and coordination to ensure that it is carried out safely and efficiently. The same applies to software development proportionally to its complexity and scale, but there are so many different systems and components that are interconnected and dependent on each other. Things like database schema to migrate or document object field to remove, entire microservices or APIs endpoint to remove, and so on. One wrong move and the entire thing could collapse. But despite the challenges, Google made the tough call to shut down Google Plus and focus on other areas where they could make a bigger impact. It was a smart business decision, even though it may have upset some die-hard Google Plus fans. This is just one example of how companies need to be willing to make hard decisions and pivot when things are not working out. Sometimes it means admitting failure and moving on to something new, even if that means abandoning something you have invested a lot of time and resources in. Do not fall into the sunk cost effect, which is the tendency to continue investing in a decision or project because of all the resources already invested, even if it no longer makes rational sense to do so. Another story is from Facebook. While this one doesn't directly illustrate the sunsetting cost, it can be another good data point to have in mind. So in October 2021, remember that there was a shortage of Facebook servers for a few hours when most Facebook or Meta services were not accessible? Wait, you didn't remember that? Long story short, Facebook messaging apps like Messenger, Instagram, or WhatsApp were not accessible, and even internal communication was not possible. In a 6 hours outage due to technical issues, Telegram, a messaging competitor app, has gained 70 million users. That's 7 zeros after the digit 7 in just a single day because users decided to migrate out of Facebook. Another similar app called Signal also profits from that outage and also gained millions of new users. Facebook stocks dropped by nearly 5% and Mark Zuckerberg's wealth fell by more than 6 billion. Insane, right? So the bigger your app and company, the more careful you need to be when adding new features, as it will over time increase complexity but also increase technical debt. That's why before adding a new major feature, I'll consider beforehand all the dependencies related to the current state of the app, and if possible, try to isolate as much as possible or related sub-features of that major new feature. So that way I can quickly test, validate hypotheses, and if necessary, get rid of it entirely without impacting or at least limiting the impact on other parts of the app. Also, before adding a new feature, it's also crucial to take a step back and have a bird's-eye view to see how it would fit into your product, not just in terms of functionality, but also from a branding, but also messaging standpoint. That leads us to the next cost, which is the branding and messaging cost. Branding and messaging cost refers to the time, money, and resources required to develop a brand identity, but also the messaging strategy for your app. Imagine if tomorrow Starbucks decided to sell shoes. Well, it's a silly example, but you'll be surprised to see some apps or companies who decide out of the blue to integrate some features that don't make any sense to the core of the apps. We're not even talking about expanding horizontally into adjacent markets. Last year was the year of crypto and Web3, and a lot of companies decided to ride on the trend and integrate blockchain technologies in their apps out of the blue, even though it doesn't make any sense. This year, AI is the hot topic, so some companies also decided to jump on the boat. I'm a big advocate to leverage those innovative technologies to add features that can help make your users' life better, but there are just too many startups or apps that blindly integrate those features to just sound cooler on marketing materials. As a personal experience, my startup SewaYou offers the possibility for members to correct each other's sentences when interacting in a foreign language. When ChatGPT API was released, I was tempted and actually coded a quick working version that allows users to talk to a chatbot and get the sentence once automatically correct it. But I decided not to release it because it will just stray away users from the first and core mission of the app, that is to connect language learners nearby in person. With a little hindsight, it will just be another feature to maintain over time. You will need to add subsequent sub-features requested by users and so on. On paper, as technical founder or product manager, that might sound cool to integrate AI into your app, right? But some users might not care at all. They came to your app because they were sold by your initial messaging, but instead found something else. Then before you realize, your app branding and messaging will be blurred and bloated by features that don't reinforce your app positioning, and it will become hard to describe your app in a simple, concise sentence what your app is trying to accomplish. In the case of SewaYou, is it to connect people in person or practicing with AI chatbots online? That last part alone is just too much, and that will weaken your app positioning. I believe that the more words you use to describe your app, the weaker the brand. A strong brand is identifiable and memorable and can be easily recognized and described by consumers. If an app description is too long and complex, it may confuse or overwhelm potential users, and it makes it more difficult for them to understand what the app does and how it can benefit them. You want to be known for one thing, and any features should strengthen that one thing. Here's a juicy story about a company jumping on the blockchain trend and completely fell. Back in 2017, Long Island Iced Tea Corp, a company that makes iced tea and lemonade, decided to change its name to Long Blockchain Corp and start focusing on blockchain technology. What? They didn't really have any experience in the blockchain industry, but they wanted to jump on the hype train and see if they could make some money. Well, the stock market loved it, and when the news broke, the stock price shot up by more than 200%. Investors were excited about the potential for Long Blockchain Corp to capitalize on the growing interest in cryptos and blockchain. But here's the thing, they really didn't have a clear plan for how to use blockchain in their business, so some people thought they were just trying to capitalize on the hype without really understanding the technology. And it turns out they were right. Long Blockchain Corp eventually announced that they were abandoning their blockchain plans and going back to making iced tea and lemonade. The company's stock price plummeted in response to the announcement, and it ultimately had to delist from Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Insane story, right? And that's what branding and messaging cost is about. The whole thing was a bit of a mess, really, and it just goes to show that you cannot just jump on a trend without really understanding what you're getting into. Sometimes it's just better to stick with what you know. Here are a few other more obvious costs to consider when adding a new feature. I won't go into details, but here they are for reference. So there are building costs. Obviously, it takes time, money, and resources to develop and integrate it into your app. Maintaining costs. So each new feature adds more complexity to your app, which can increase its maintenance cost, but also the app's overall performance. Opportunity costs. So that's the resource that could be allocated to other projects or initiatives. Testing costs, technical debt costs, legal and compliance costs, scalability costs, analytics and users feedback costs, but also competitive costs, security costs, but also localization costs. And I can go on, so let me know in the comment if you think of other costs that are not mentioned in the video. While building many average features when your users will remember you for one thing. Like Steve Jobs said, focus is about saying no to things that don't matter. Did you know why Gmail became so successful when there were back then fierce competitors like Yahoo Email or Hotmail? Back in the early days of Gmail, its creators were focused on building an email service that would solve their own email problem. One of the biggest issues they faced was the lack of a good search features for email. So they built their own search engine, and it worked like a charm, and it was so good that it sets Gmail apart from its competitors. But the search feature also led to another breakthrough, the need for more storage space. Before Gmail, most email services had a limit on how much storage space you could use. This means that most users had to constantly delete all emails to make room for new ones. But with Gmail's larger storage, users could keep all the emails without worrying about running out of space. Gmail was offering 1 GB of storage, which was 500 times more than Microsoft Hotmail at that time. This search and storage combo combo was a game changer for email users, and it quickly made Gmail one of the most popular email services in the world. That's an example of a killer feature that got Gmail way ahead from its competitors. It started with obsessing with one thing, in this case searching emails, and then all subsequent features directly result from wanting to make that search feature much better. Of course, after that there were other improvements like a fast responsive interface and so on. On my startup SewaYou app, everything is about connecting language partners to meet up and practice a foreign language in person. So all features added about making the logistic of finding and meeting up with language partners nearby seamless and frictionless. Features that help answer the questions of who to meet, where to meet, and when to meet are ranked with higher priority in the backlogs and list of features to add and improve. By focusing on building many average features, you risk diluting your core offering and confusing your users about what you truly excel at. You can also create a cluttered and overwhelming user experience, making it more difficult for users to navigate and find a feature that truly matters to them. So keep features that are aligned with your product, and like they said, less is more. So while you can be excited by the idea of adding new and technically challenging features, you need to consider all the hidden costs that we have discussed in this video and find the ones that strengthen your brand, your positioning, and can 10x your business. It's sometimes not easy to balance that, especially when you're a technical founder like me. I talk about the pros and cons in detail of being a technical founder, so check out this video if you want to learn more. Are there any other costs that I haven't mentioned in this video? If there are, let me know in the comment section. I release a weekly video until my startup SewaYou IPO, so video packed with startup tips and lessons I've learned over the years building my own startup. So click the subscribe button and hit the bell notification if you don't want to miss any new release videos, because these days YouTube changed a lot and just subscribing to the channel is not enough anymore to be notified. Also, it's getting dark outside. Follow me on Instagram for bite-sized short videos on the behind the scene of building a startup as a solo and foreign founder in Japan. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.